morning. Thanks for joining us. It's been a tough summer so far for violence in the city of Boston, with a jump in non-fatal shootings over last year and a controversial crackdown in an area of the city with a concentration of drug users. Let's find out what's going on as we talk about that and more with our guest this morning, Suffolk County District Attorney Rachael Rollins. DA, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
So what's up with all the shootings? Are these gang beefs, domestic violence cases, or what?
Well, we had, sadly, a domestic violence homicide this past Sunday. It was a stabbing. The uptick in non-fatal shootings, we do believe there is an increase in certain communities that have been rivaling with each other. Gang involved for quite some time. And sadly, we've had depending on whose numbers there are, 27 or 28 homicides. I count Jassy Carrera as a homicide in Suffolk County because she's from Dorchester, even though the U.S. Attorney is handling that.
That was the young woman who was taken outside a nightclub and murdered,
in Rhode Island, and then we found Mr. Coleman in Delaware. So, yeah, we've had a lot of violence, unfortunately.
What explains it, or is it explicable?
Well, I will be candid. I think that some of the non-fatal shootings, it's worse than we've seen in some time, between overwhelmingly within the Cape Verdean community, which I'm working really hard with Commissioner Gross to try to have more Cape Verdean Creole public service announcements with respect to the uptick in domestic violence and the shootings there, so that they know they can come to our offices if they need help or services. We
hear a lot of rhetoric from President Trump and others at the federal level about criminals coming into the country along with other immigrants. Is there any evidence of that in this regard?
No, the Cape Verdean community is a vibrant, beautiful, educated, wonderful community within Boston. We're proud of all of the exceptional contributions they have to the city of Boston, and I believe that it's fear-mongering when the president and others in his administration try to say that immigrants, particularly brown immigrants that come into our communities and the United States, are violent. Not all of them are. Just like when we talk about Operation Clean Sweep that happened on August 1st, there was a violent attack of a corrections officer. Right. Those individuals will be held accountable. I personally sat in 3 arraignments, but 34 people and counting were swept up there. And I don't think it should be illegal to exist. Many of those individuals were just homeless or had substance use disorder or mental health issue, and they were swept away from the very services they should be getting there.
Do you and the police department see eye to eye on this now, or is there a difference of opinion?
I think there is. I think there's still a difference of opinion, but I will say, what else are the police supposed to do? They're receiving many 911 calls from residents in that area, from people who have businesses in that area, from people that are driving down the street and seeing open drug use, open fornication at times and other things. It's almost like Amsterdam in The Wire, right? Yeah. So what is Commissioner Gross to do? I'm excited we've got some more stakeholders at the table, John, and I met recently with none of the people from law enforcement, but the individuals that are impacted themselves or the entities that help them.
We've got to take a break, but very briefly, speaking of drug use, there's been a movement in other countries and elsewhere around the country to have safe injection sites so that this drug use, needles aren't littering the streets. Sure. There's some kind of control or monitoring over this. Apparently the mayor of Somerville, Joe Curtatone, says he's going to go ahead and start doing this. Sure. The city of Boston's been reluctant. Do you think it's a good idea?
I mean, we're seeing it happening in Philadelphia. It's going to be rolled out this year in Philadelphia, San Francisco. SIFMA, which is an organization about safe injection facilities, was at the meeting that we had on Monday. I'm open to hearing it, because what we're doing right now is not working.
So you think there's a chance it might improve the quality of life for everybody?
100. We have seen data show that it does decrease the level of crime, the needles that are in the community. City Council, Boston City Councilor Sabi George said she'd be willing to hear about them. I think she's going to travel to Canada. The governor had an advisory committee that told him that we should do this, maybe in a pilot sense. The U.S. attorneys made it clear he would prosecute. I think we're bubbling up right now, and we need some leadership that's going to say we're trying something different.
All right, we'll take our break right now and continue our conversation with Suffolk County DA Rachael Rollins in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back to our conversation with Suffolk County DA Rachael Rollins. And Rachel, you're already well known for your pursuit of a policy that's being practiced in a number of cities around the country. Your predecessor, Dan Conley, also engaged in this, of being much more selective about the types of cases that you prosecute, to try to conserve resources, apply them to violent crimes and so forth. The latest harsh critic of this is the Attorney General of the United States, William Barr, who recently derided, quote, social justice prosecutors with no prosecute lists, who he claimed were, quoting again, demoralizing to law enforcement and dangerous to public safety. And he argued these policies will lead to more crime and more victims. What did you make of those remarks coming from the top law enforcement officer in the country?
Yeah, I mean, I commented back, I'd rather be a social justice prosecutor than a social injustice prosecutor. I find it really quite flattering, actually, that the President of the United States, when Marion Ryan, District Attorney Ryan, and I decided to sue ICE and file a preliminary injunction along with the Chelsea Collaborative and others, was outraged at that, and our preliminary injunction was granted. Just like the Attorney General is trying to mischaracterize things that I've said. I will always hold people responsible if they resist arrest from a law enforcement officer when they are charged with other crimes that are serious violent crimes. What my list talks about is a standalone resisting arrest charge, and we never said we weren't going to prosecute. We just said we're going to pause for a minute, because usually anyone who's involved in criminal justice or criminal law knows that that's an interaction with law enforcement that didn't go well.
Now, you recently dabbled in my field, which frightened me a little bit because I need my job.
Yeah.
But as a political analyst, watching the most recent round of Democratic candidate debates, with regard to criminal justice issues, what are you hearing that excites you from any specific candidate or them in general? And what are you hearing or not hearing that annoys you?
Yeah, well, I think what's great is that this is going to be one of the big topics that all of the candidates have to discuss. I think talking about wealth-based disparities and race-based disparities, certainly number one is gun violence, right? When we see all of these mass shootings, we need a federal a federal standard with respect to who is capable of getting guns. We look right now, John, in Massachusetts, we have some of the strictest gun laws in the country, but we're abutted with a 40-minute drive by 2 other states that don't have the same stringent requirements in order to have a firearm. So I think what we need to do is start having really serious conversations about the Second Amendment and about weapons, some people are calling, of mass destruction, these high-powered assault rifles and other things, bump stocks that people are able to use that have literally mowed down hundreds of people.
We're out of time, but is there one candidate who has made you sit up and say, yes, he or she is on to this, I like what they're saying?
I will say that I recently had a conversation with Senator Warren's staff about some of this, and I'm really impressed with where she's going, but I think there are some really good people in the race.
Yeah, you're not endorsing.
I'm not. Yeah. I'm just saying, that's it. I'm not endorsing, but I'm saying her staff is really well versed in this area.
Glad you could come back.
Thanks.
Looking forward to having you again soon. Thank you for your time.
You bet.